Rugby World Cup Week 3, folks. 2023 competition. What are 5 takeaways from the week that was? We're not talking about food. We're talking about rugby. What's been going on. And, yeah, there's been a few kind of interesting storylines with this week's action. As always, you guys let us know your thoughts. And for this one, written up a piece for Planet Rugby as well. So that'll be down in the description too if you want to check that out. There's heaps of rugby going on. And they are a pretty good source for it. Firstly, it's pretty easy. I don't mean to kick a man when he's down, but to say the Aussie lows with Eddie Jones's current situation, not great. Record loss to Wales, record loss at the World Cup, and barring a miracle, going out at the pool stages of the World Cup, having made some big calls to drop the likes of Michael Hooper and Quade Cooper, and they didn't bring Pete Samu, and blah, 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 blah. They have not paid off. You would have thought the minimum requirements for Eddie Jones is, look, you take the youngsters, you get out the pool. If you lose in quarterfinals, hey, at least you guys gave it a crack. You took the youngsters, and they'll learn from it. But, geez, they're going to be scarred from it going out in the pool. And with that record loss, they didn't look like a side that was fighting to get out of the pool or to save their coach. They looked lost and directionless and, yeah, deer in the headlights kind of stuff from the Wallabies in that second half against Wales. Not to take anything away from Wales. I spoke their praises in the match review for that game. Wales were bloody good, and they certainly look like a team who's tracking in the right direction, but, geez, the Wallabies, it's an all-time low, at least in my lifetime. Really, really poor. We'll see what happens, man. There's been talk that he's been having conversations with Japan. He didn't bluntly deny it. He just kind of dodged the question and took umbrage to it when he was asked about it in the press conference, if that was a thing. I don't know if it's a where smoke there's fire, because there's been plenty of times when the media has been dead wrong about that kind of stuff. But, yeah, not great for Aussie rugby at the moment, which, people will say, you know, as a Kiwi, you must find it funny or whatever. Like, nah, man. These are our closest neighbours. We play them more than anybody else. New Zealand benefits from having a strong Aussie team, and at the minute, it's pretty painful to see them where they are at. Secondly, it's the old French injuries, and the main man, Antoine Dupont, their captain, is giving me vibes of bloody Dan Carter back in 2011. It's a home World Cup. We're still in the pool stages. And what is arguably the best player in the world gets injured. Now, the difference being between these two situations with Dan was in training. Antoine's injury was on the field. It was a head collision. He's got like a fracture in his face. He's had surgery to fix it. They ruled Dan out like a day or two after the injury happened back in 2011. Whereas Antoine, they still haven't kind of made that call yet. We haven't been given a timeline on when he could return. Some are saying he could be back, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. I don't know. Just depends on, on how successful the surgery went and his individual situation. But obviously, we want him to get fit. He is just being a world-class player, the kind of player you want to see playing at a Rugby World Cup. So to not have him, and then you add to that Intermac being out, Willems are pulling out before the competition as well. I mean, they've been bolstered by the return of Baye and Gillon and whatnot, but goodness me, it's bad news for France. And as I said, every team loses players. Malcolm Marx going for South Africa was awful, and Lukanyo pulling up injured before the competition started. That kind of stuff is awful as well. Van Portfleet for England. There's been loads of players who missed the competition through injury, either in match or in training. But goodness me, please not Antoine Dupont, man. You would have to think it dents their chances if he's not going to play. But we'll see what happens. France has got pretty good depth, but Antoine is not like-for-like replaceable. And some people are saying he shouldn't have been playing in that game. Dan Carter got injured in training. So rugby players, they're going to get injured. You just got to hope you don't have that kind of bad luck, I suppose. Third one, I'm just going to call it a cut above, because that game between South Africa and Ireland felt like a cut above all the other games we've seen. I know the opening game between France and New Zealand was a pretty cracking one. especially from a French point of view. But this game, Ireland and South Africa, I said at the time, feels like a final. There's still a chance that it could be a final. Obviously, neither side was perfect by any means. There's going to be a lot talked about South Africa's goal kicking. Their work at the breakdown also came under a bit of scrutiny. The 7-1 split came under a bit of scrutiny. I felt like it had some areas of success, but obviously the breakdown certainly wasn't one of them. That's one area where Ireland excelled. Ireland will be looking at their line out. The fact that they couldn't get their line out going meant it limited their maul opportunities. So, yeah, but that game overall just felt like it was a cut above everything else we've seen thus far. And there's been a bunch of blowouts, and there's been, some of the kind of heavy-hitting clashes thus far, but it just felt, I don't know, something kind of special about that game. So, would it surprise me to see these two teams meet again in the final? No. Is there a lot of rugby to be played between now and then? Yes. Ireland have still got to play Scotland. Scotland are still alive. South Africa have still got a job to do against Tonga. Having lost the game, that'll add to their mental pressure, but having seen what Scotland did to Tonga, you'd think South Africa is going to go through pretty comfortably, but still lots of rugby to be played. There's big quarterfinals to come. Nobody's counting no chickens or anything, but that game just felt like it was on another level from what we've seen thus far. Next one, I'm going to say Portugal impress. And I say Portugal impress because, let's be honest, there's been some blowouts, which I wouldn't blame you guys for not watching. Some of you guys have said, look, I'm not watching England and Chile when it's 71-0. I'm not watching South Africa, Romania when it's a big old hiding like that. I'm not watching Namibia against New Zealand or France because, watching a team get humped by 60, 70, 80, 90 points is not fun. And I would be inclined to agree with you. I prefer a close game rather than just blowout games, even if there are some silky skills on display. However, Portugal's kind of flying the flag for the Tier 2 sides. I know they've only had 2 games. They had a Welsh side which changed a bunch of players against them. But realistically, Portugal was going against the Six Nations side, got beaten by 20 points, which in terms of watchability is pretty watchable. The game had back and forth. It had some to and fro. Wales had to really work for the bonus point. It's much more watchable than 70+0 or, 3 or whatever it is. And then their second game, they played Georgia, who's their traditional rival, but is usually the rival they can't beat. And they get a draw, and they came that close to winning it. So I know they're only 2 games in. I know they've still got to play Australia. And they're still going to play Fiji. So they still could get, a humping at some point. But, so far, the Portuguese, I think, are flying the flag pretty high for the teams who we maybe don't usually see if you're used to watching Six Nations Rugby Championship kind of games. And the last one, Argentina. I'm just going to write horse, ? Are Argentina still a kind of dark horse for this competition? Because going into this one, there was a lot of talk about how England aren't up to scratch and Wales aren't going to get out of their pool. The Wallabies are struggling with their young side. But Argentina, with the way the draw works, favourites for their pool, maybe get to a semi-final pretty easily. And then who knows? Are they still in that position? It doesn't quite feel like it. But it only takes a week or 2 for these teams to click. You only need to have a couple of good performances in a row. They've been a bit lackluster, though, thus far. They have not set the world alight. At times, they look good in the Rugby Championship against the likes of New Zealand and South Africa and Australia. At times, they didn't look great. They've just looked a bit lethargic thus far. Perhaps that comes to direction. I know a lot of Argentinian fans would rather see the likes of Nico Sanchez running the ship than Carreras, who is, with his background as more of an outside back, maybe potentially more individually minded than kind of playmaking minded. But yeah, they sure enough, they beat Samoa in what was a bit of an arm wrestle, but it wasn't, no team, you look at the South Africa-Ireland game and you look at that Argentina game and you don't look at the Argentinian performance and going, they're going to challenge a South Africa or an Ireland. Not yet. Like I said, there's still more rugby to come, and you only have to click on one game to get through a quarterfinal and click again to get through a semi-final. Bob's your uncle. You're in a World Cup final. But right now, that kind of tag of dark horse, not quite living up to it just yet. They've got the players. The likes of Mateo Carreras, Boffelli with his boot. You know, they've got some bloody good loose forwards in Matera and Kremer, and Petty is one of the most skilled locks you'll see. But, yeah, they're not quite living up to the pre-tournament hype just yet. But they're still alive. They still got games to go. They still got time to click. We will see. You guys let us know your thoughts. What else do you reckon about the Rugby World Cup after 3 weeks? Fingers crossed DuPont gets back fit soon. At least he's not been ruled out just yet. I'm sure they will give him as long as they potentially can to get him to recover, but we'll wait and see. You guys let us know your thoughts. Check out the Planet Rugby article, and yeah, I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.